Elena, pack your bags. You're leaving for London tonight. I looked up from my laptop, stunned. Adrian stood in the doorway of our shared office, his face cold as winter stone. 3 years of building this company together, 3 years of stolen kisses between board meetings, 3 years of promises whispered in the dark, and this is how he tells me goodbye. What are you talking about? I stood slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The London branch needs someone to oversee the merger. You're the obvious choice. His voice was businesslike, detached, as if he were discussing quarterly reports instead of ripping my world apart. Adrian, we had plans for tonight. The restaurant reservation, cancel it. He turned away, unable to meet my eyes. This is a great opportunity for your career, Elena. You should be grateful. Grateful? The word hit me like a slap. I walked around the desk, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Look at me when you're lying to me. His jaw tightened, but he didn't turn around. I'm not lying. This is business. Business? I laughed, but there was no humour in it. Is that what you call 3 years of us? Is that what you called it last week when you told me you loved me? Finally, he faced me. His eyes, those dark eyes I'd fallen for, were empty. That was a mistake. The words hung in the air between us like poison. I felt something inside me crack, then shatter completely. A mistake. Elena, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be? My voice rose, and I didn't care who heard. You're sending me to another continent, Adrian. You're ending us without even having the courage to say it directly. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just looked guilty. There is no us, Elena. There never really was. We got caught up in the excitement of building the company together. That's all. Each word was a knife between my ribs. 3 years. 3 years of thinking I was building a life with this man. 3 years of turning down other opportunities, other men, other chances at happiness because I believed in what we had. I see. My voice came out steady, controlled. Years of corporate training kicked in, the ability to maintain composure even when everything was falling apart. And this sudden realization has nothing to do with Victoria Ashford. The slight flinch gave him away. Victoria is your father's choice, I know. The merger with Ashford Industries. How convenient that their daughter just happens to be single. This isn't about her, isn't it? I stepped closer, watching his face. Tell me, Adrian, when is the engagement announcement? Or has that already been decided too? His silence was answer enough. I nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place. How long have you known? How long have you been planning to throw me away for her? Elena. How long? My voice cracked and I hated myself for it. 6 months, he whispered, and the final piece of my heart crumbled to dust. 6 months. While I was working 18-hour days to secure investors, while I was turning down Harvard's job offer because I wanted to stay here with him. While I was planning our future, he was already planning mine without him. I picked up my laptop bag with steady hands. You know what, Adrian? You're right. London is a great opportunity. He looked surprised by my calm acceptance. Elena, I hope she's worth it. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. But more than that, I hope you deserve her, because you certainly never deserved me. I walked out of that office with my head high and my spine straight. I made it all the way to the elevator before the tears came. But as the doors closed and I saw my reflection in the polished steel, something else flickered in my eyes. Something cold and calculating. Adrian thought he was so clever, manipulating me out of the picture so he could have his perfect arranged marriage. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd received a call that morning. A call that changed everything. Miss Romano, the voice had said, warm and accented with old money refinement. This is James Wellington. I have a proposition for you. James Wellington, CEO of Wellington Global, the biggest competitor to Blackwood Industries. The man whose company could buy and sell Adrian's empire twice over. I'm listening, I'd said, not knowing then how prophetic those words would be. I'd like to offer you a position as my chief operating officer, and... There had been a pause, loaded with meaning. I believe we could be partners in more ways than one. I told him I needed time to think, time to discuss it with Adrian, time to consider what leaving would mean for us. How naive I'd been, thinking there was still an us to consider. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I stepped out into the marble lobby of Blackwood Industries, the company I'd helped build from a struggling startup into a billion-dollar empire, the company that was about to lose their best asset. My phone buzzed with a text message. James Wellington. Have you considered my offer? The position comes with a signing bonus of $50 million, and I meant what I said about partnership, in every sense of the word. Jay. I stared at the message, then at the building around me, at the company logo I'd helped design, at the receptionist who smiled at me with pity in her eyes, because of course everyone knew before I did, they always do. Another message came through, this one from an unknown number. Congratulations on the London position. So excited to be working more closely with Adrian now. Victoria. My blood turned to ice. She knew. She'd known about London before I did, which meant she'd been part of planning my exile. I typed back to James Wellington with steady fingers. I accept your offer, all of it. When do we announce our engagement? E. His response came immediately. How about tomorrow, right after Blackwood's board meeting? J. Perfect. Adrian wanted to play games. He wanted to use me as a pawn and discard me when convenient. He had no idea what game he'd just started. I walked out of that building for the last time, my head high and my future bright. Behind me, Adrian was probably celebrating his clever manoeuvring, thinking he'd handled everything so smoothly. Tomorrow, he'd learned that the woman he threw away had just become his biggest nightmare. Tomorrow, he'd realised that in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board, and this queen was about to declare checkmate. The penthouse elevator climbed silently toward the 42nd floor. I adjusted the diamond tennis bracelet on my wrist, a gift from James that arrived this morning along with the engagement ring currently burning a hole in my purse. The irony wasn't lost on me. 24 hours ago, I was preparing for a quiet dinner with Adrian. Now I was about to walk into Wellington Global as their new COO and future Mrs. Wellington. Nervous? James asked, his hand warm on the small of my back. I looked at him. Really looked. Silver at his temples, laugh lines around intelligent green eyes. The kind of understated confidence that came from old money and older power. He was everything Adrian pretended to be. Should I be? His smile was predatory. Adrian Blackwood should be. The elevator doors opened to reveal a war room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but my attention was fixed on the massive conference table, covered in documents, financial reports, and what looked like a complete breakdown of Blackwood Industries' vulnerabilities. Welcome to your new office, James said, gesturing to the corner suite visible through glass walls. I took the liberty of having your things moved from Blackwood this morning. I raised an eyebrow. Confident, weren't you? I've been watching you for 2 years, Elena. Every strategic decision at Blackwood that actually worked. That was you. Every investor meeting that closed successfully. You prepped the presentation? Adrian Blackwood has been coasting on your brilliance, and everyone in the industry knows it. He wasn't wrong. While Adrian played golf with Daddy's friends, I'd been the one actually running the company. But hearing it said so bluntly should have felt validating. Instead, it just reminded me how blind I'd been. So this is revenge? I asked, examining a document marked Project Overthrow. This is justice. James moved to stand beside me, close enough that I caught his cologne. Something expensive and subtle, unlike Adrian's aggressive designer scent. But if it happens to destroy the man who threw away the most brilliant woman in tech, well, that's just a pleasant bonus. My phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed on the screen along with a string of increasingly frantic messages. Elena, we need to talk. Where are you? Your assistant says you didn't go to London. This is childish. Call me back. Victoria mentioned she texted you. That was inappropriate. Let me explain. I showed the messages to James, who laughed. A rich, genuine sound. He's scared, James observed. Good. He should be. Why? I set my phone face down on the table. What exactly did you have in mind? James pulled out a chair for me, ever the gentleman. Sit. Let me tell you a story about market manipulation, corporate espionage, and how Adrian Blackwood built his empire on stolen technology. For the next hour, James laid out a case that made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, a smaller tech company called Meridian had developed revolutionary AI software. The owner, desperate for funding, had pitched it to several major companies. Blackwood Industries passed, claiming the technology wasn't viable. 6 months later, Blackwood launched their flagship product, software that was suspiciously similar to Meridian's original design. Meridian's owner, Dr. Sarah Kim, tried to sue. James continued, sliding a photo across the table. But she was a single mother, recently divorced, going up against Blackwood's legal army. She ran out of money before she could prove her case. I stared at the photo of a woman about my age, exhaustion and defeat clear in her eyes. What happened to her? She lost everything. Her house, her savings, her daughter's college fund. Last I heard, she was working as a programmer for minimum wage in Portland. The room felt cold despite the morning sun streaming through the windows. Adrian knew about this? Elena, who do you think ran the legal strategy to bury her? The truth hit me like a physical blow. I'd been the one to coordinate with the legal team. I'd been the one to find precedents that would help dismiss her case. I'd been the one to... I helped him steal from her. The words tasted like ash. You didn't know, James said gently. Adrian fed you a story about protecting company interests from frivolous lawsuits. You were doing your job. But that didn't make it better. I thought about all of the late nights I'd worked, all the strategies I'd developed, all the victories I'd celebrated. How much of it was built on theft? How much of Adrian's success was bought with other people's dreams? There's more, James continued. The Ashford merger? It's not about love or even business synergy. Ashford Industries has been investigating Blackwood for months. They found irregularities in at least 6 major product launches. Victoria's engagement to Adrian isn't romantic. It's a hostile takeover disguised as a wedding. I laughed bitterly. So she's using him too. The difference is she knows it. Adrian thinks he's getting a perfect wife and a business empire. What he's actually getting is a very elegant form of corporate execution. My phone rang. James glanced at the screen and smirked. Right, on schedule. Adrian's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Elena, where the hell are you? Your security badge was deactivated this morning, and your office is empty. I'm exactly where you sent me, Adrian. Away! This isn't funny. I need you here. The Nakamura deal is falling apart, and the board is asking questions about the quarterly projections. The projections I prepared last month, the ones you presented as your own work? Silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. Elena, please, come back. We can work this out. Can we? Because yesterday you told me there was no us. You said 3 years was a mistake. Which is it, Adrian? I was wrong. I was scared about the merger, about the pressure from my father. Your father, who's been planning to get rid of me since day one. The father who thinks I'm not good enough for the Blackwood name. That's not... Elena, just come back, please. I looked at James, who was watching me with those intelligent green eyes. He mouthed the words, "Your choice," and meant it. That's when I realised the difference between him and Adrian. James had given me options, information, power. Adrian had given me ultimatums disguised as gifts. I can't do that, Adrian. Why not? Elena, whatever's going on, we can fix it. I love you. Do you? Because you have a funny way of showing it. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. James was studying me with something that might have been admiration. Feel better? He asked. Actually, yes. And I did. For the first time in months, I felt clear-headed, focused. So, what's the plan? James's smile was sharper than a blade. We're going to give Mr. Blackwood exactly what he deserves, but first... He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. I believe we have an engagement to announce. The ring was perfect, not the ostentatious diamond Adrian would have chosen, but an elegant emerald surrounded by diamonds, vintage and sophisticated. As James slipped it onto my finger, I felt a strange sense of rightness. Not love, not yet, but partnership, equality. The press conference is in an hour, he said. Wellington Global's acquisition of Blackwood Industries' former COO, effective immediately. Plus our engagement announcement. Won't that seem sudden? Eleanor, darling, we've been quietly seeing each other for months. Everyone will say how romantic it is that you chose love over loyalty to your former company. The story was already written, the pieces already in motion. Adrian had wanted to play chess with my life. He was about to learn that he'd been playing checkers while I'd been learning from a grandmaster. One question, I said, admiring the weight of the ring on my finger. What happened to Dr. Kim? James's expression softened slightly. She gets her life back. Wellington Global is very interested in acquiring certain reclaimed technologies. For the right price, of course. Justice. Not just for me, but for everyone Adrian had stepped on in his climb to the top. I could work with that. Then let's begin, I said, and meant it. The flash of cameras was blinding. I stood beside James on the steps of Wellington Global, his arm around my waist, the emerald engagement ring catching the morning light like a weapon. Behind us, the company logo gleamed in brushed steel, a stark contrast to Blackwood's gaudy gold lettering visible across the street. Miss Romano, a reporter thrust a microphone toward me. How long have you and Mr. Wellington been together? James and I have been friends for years, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. But our relationship became romantic about 6 months ago. 6 months, the exact timeline Adrian had been planning my disposal. The irony was delicious. What about your position at Blackwood Industries? Another reporter called out. James stepped forward, his hand tightening protectively on my waist. Elena has accepted the role of Chief Operating Officer at Wellington Global. Her brilliant strategic mind will be instrumental in our upcoming expansion. From across the street, I could see movement in Blackwood's executive floor, silhouettes pressed against the windows, watching the spectacle. I wondered if Adrian was among them, watching his carefully laid plans crumble in real time. My phone, which I'd turned back on for the press conference, was vibrating constantly. Text after text from Adrian, from his assistant, from board members. The panic was spreading through Blackwood like wildfire. Elena! A familiar voice cut through the crowd. I turned to see Victoria Ashford pushing through the reporters, her perfectly styled blonde hair slightly dishevelled, her composure cracking around the edges. She reached the bottom of the steps and stopped, staring up at me with something that might have been respect. We need to talk. I don't think that's wise. James murmured in my ear, but I was already moving. Give me 5 minutes, I told him, then walked down to meet Victoria on neutral ground. Up close, she was even more beautiful than her photos suggested, but there was steel beneath the porcelain perfection. This wasn't some vapid socialite. This was a woman who'd orchestrated a corporate takeover disguised as a love story. Impressive, she said, gesturing at the ring on my finger. Though I have to ask, is this revenge or genuine feeling? Does it matter? She laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. No, I suppose it doesn't. We're both playing the same game, aren't we? Just on different sides. Are we? I studied her face, looking for tells. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're the one being played. Her smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? Adrian thinks he's getting a trophy wife and a business merger. You think you're getting revenge for your father's company. But what if you're both wrong? Victoria's eyes narrowed. Explain. I glanced back at James, who was fielding questions with the ease of someone born to power. James showed me the real numbers this morning. Ashford Industries isn't acquiring Blackwood. Wellington Global is acquiring both companies. Your father's been in debt to James for years. This merger is just a polite way of calling in that debt. The colour drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. Is it? When did your father first suggest you get close to Adrian? Right after that failed expansion into Asian markets? Right after James started buying up Ashford's bonds? Victoria's perfect composure finally cracked. You're lying. Check your father's books. Real ones, and not the sanitized versions he shows the board. I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. You're not the hunter, Victoria. You're the bait. She stood there for a long moment, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. How long have you known? About you since yesterday? About your father's situation since this morning? I touched her arm gently. James likes to keep his allies informed. Allies? She looked up at me with something like hope. You want Adrian to pay for what he's done to your family. I want him to pay for what he's done to mine. James wants to expand his empire. Dr. Sarah Kim wants her technology back. I smiled. The enemy of my enemy, and all that. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, what do you need from me? Everything you know about Adrian's dealings with your father. Every illegal favour, every under-the-table agreement, every piece of blackmail material. I paused. And I need you to marry him. Her eyes widened. What? As his wife, you'll have access to everything. His personal accounts, his private communications, his real business records, things even I never saw. I leaned closer. James can protect your family's legitimate assets, but only if we have enough evidence to bring Adrian down completely. And if I refuse, I shrugged, then you marry him anyway, but your father loses everything and you gain nothing. At least this way, you get to choose how the story ends. Victoria looked back at the Blackwood building, then at the reporters still shouting questions at James. He really threw you away for me. He threw me away for the merger. You were just the packaging. What an idiot, she said, and I couldn't help but smile. The biggest, I agreed. All right, Victoria said, straightening her shoulders. I'm in, but I want immunity for my father, and I want Ashford Industries to survive as an independent entity. James, I called over my shoulder. He appeared to my side instantly, having wrapped up the press conference. Miss Ashford, how unexpected. She's joining our little alliance, I said, in exchange for her father's immunity and Ashford's independence. James studied Victoria like a chess player examining a new piece. Can you get us into Adrian's private files? Give me 2 weeks after the wedding, Victoria said. I'll get you everything. Done. James extended his hand, and Victoria shook it with the gravity of a treaty signing. "Welcome to the winning side." As if summoned by our plotting, a black sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. Adrian burst out, his usually perfect hair dishevelled, his tie askew. He looked like a man watching his empire burn. "Victoria!" He strode toward us, his eyes wild. "What are you doing here? Elena, what the hell is this?" I held up my left hand, letting the emerald catch the light. "Congratulations, Adrian. You'll be getting a wedding invitation soon." His face went through several shades of pale. "You can't be serious. Deadly serious." James stepped forward, and I noticed he was slightly taller than Adrian, broader through the shoulders. Everything about his presence screamed alpha male, in a way that Adrian's desperate aggression never could. "Elena has accepted my proposal." "This is insane." Adrian's voice cracked slightly. "Elena, you can't make decisions like this out of spite." "Spite," I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Adrian, this has nothing to do with spite. This is about business. James offered me everything you never could: respect, partnership, honesty. I can give you those things. You had 3 years to give me those things. Instead, you gave me lies and manipulation and a one-way ticket to London." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his dark eyes. "But thank you, really. If you hadn't thrown me away, I never would have discovered what I was actually worth." Adrian's gaze darted between me, James, and Victoria. "Victoria, say something. This is crazy." "Actually," Victoria said, slipping her arm through his with practiced ease, "I think it's romantic. Elena deserves someone who appreciates her intelligence." She looked at Adrian with false sweetness. "Don't you agree, darling?" I watched Adrian's face cycle through confusion, panic, and finally a dawning realization that he was completely outmaneuvered. The man who thought he was the puppet master had just discovered he was the puppet. "The wedding invitations go out next week," James said casually. "I do hope you'll both attend. It should be quite the celebration." As we walked back up the steps to Wellington Global, I could feel Adrian's stare burning into my back. Let him watch. Let him realise what he'd lost. Let him count the cost of his arrogance. Behind us, Victoria was already working her magic, soothing Adrian's panic with practiced lies about press strategy and damage control. She was better at this than I'd given her credit for. "Feeling good?" James asked as we entered the lobby. "Getting there," I said, but the truth was, I felt better than I had in months. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't scrambling to prove my worth or justify my place. I was exactly where I belonged, on the winning side. My phone buzzed with one final message from Adrian. "This isn't over." I showed it to James, who smiled with genuine amusement. "He's right," James said. "It's not over. It's just beginning." 3 weeks later, I stood in the bridal suite of the Ritz-Carlton, adjusting Victoria's veil. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at her reflection. A vision in ivory silk. About to walk down the aisle to marry the man who destroyed both our lives. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, pinning a final pearl into her hair. "Are you?" she countered, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Because once I say I do, there's no going back." I thought about the flash drive hidden in my clutch, loaded with enough evidence to bury Adrian and his father for corporate fraud, tax evasion, and industrial espionage. 3 weeks of careful planning, of Victoria playing the perfect fiancée while secretly photographing documents and recording conversations. "Remember," I said softly, "the safe in his home office. The combination is his mother's birthday, March 15th, 1962. That's where he keeps the original Meridian files." Victoria nodded, her game face sliding into place. "What about you? Are you ready for tonight?" "Tonight? The reception?" where James would announce Wellington Global's acquisition of both Blackwood Industries and Ashford Holdings, where Adrian would learn that his wedding day was also his corporate funeral. Eleanor, Victoria caught my hand. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know I never meant for things to go this far. When my father first told me to get close to Adrian, I thought it was just business. I didn't know about you. I know. And I did. Victoria wasn't the villain in this story. She was another victim of powerful men who treated women like chess pieces. A knock at the door interrupted us. 5 minutes, Miss Ashford. Victoria took a deep breath, transforming before my eyes into the radiant bride Adrian expected. Showtime! The ceremony was a masterpiece of calculated perfection. I sat in the third row, watching Adrian's face as he promised to love and cherish the woman who was about to destroy him. James sat beside me, his hand warm on mine, playing the role of devoted fiancé to perfection. But it was the moment after Adrian kissed his bride that everything changed. Ladies and gentlemen, the officiant announced, before we adjourn to the reception, Mr. Wellington has asked to share some exciting news. Adrian's smile faltered. This wasn't part of the programme. James stood, commanding the room's attention effortlessly. Thank you, Reverend. Adrian, Victoria, congratulations on this beautiful union. It seems appropriate that on a day celebrating new beginnings, we should announce another exciting development. I watched Adrian's face go from confusion to growing alarm. Effective immediately, Wellington Global is pleased to announce the acquisition of Blackwood Industries, along with our partnership with the FBI's Corporate Crime Division in investigating extensive financial irregularities dating back 5 years. The silence in the church was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Adrian lunged forward, but 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind the altar, FBI agents. Adrian Blackwood, the taller agent said, his voice carrying over the screams and shouts. You're under arrest for corporate espionage, tax fraud, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. This is my wedding, Adrian shouted, struggling as they cuffed him. You can't do this. Actually, Victoria said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. I can. She reached into her bouquet and pulled out a small recording device. Agent Morrison, I believe this contains everything you need for the racketeering charges as well. Adrian's face went white. Victoria, what have you done? What you taught me to do, darling. Her smile was ice cold. I played the game better than you did. The church erupted into total pandemonium. Guests were fleeing, phones were recording, and Adrian was being dragged away in handcuffs, still in his wedding tuxedo. But the real shock came when Victoria turned to the assembled crowd and raised her voice above the chaos. For those who don't know me beyond today's pageantry, my name is Victoria Kim Ashford. Dr. Sarah Kim was my aunt. My blood froze. The woman whose technology Adrian had stolen, whose life he'd destroyed. She was Victoria's family. 5 years ago, my aunt brought her revolutionary AI software to Blackwood Industries, seeking partnership and funding. Adrian Blackwood stole her life's work, buried her in legal fees, and drove her to financial ruin. Victoria's voice carried to every corner of the church. She died last year, penniless and forgotten, never knowing that justice would come. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about business or revenge. This was about family, about a daughter avenging her aunt's death. Victoria, I whispered, but she wasn't finished. My father and I have spent 3 years infiltrating Adrian's world, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. She looked directly at me. We never expected to find another victim, someone who could help us build an ironclad case. James squeezed my hand. Did you know? I asked him. I suspected. Sarah Kim was Victoria's mother's sister. When I started investigating Adrian's theft, the family connection became clear. He smiled grimly. What I didn't expect was how perfectly you'd fit into their plan. I stared at him, pieces of a larger puzzle suddenly snapping together. You knew about me before you made that offer. You'd been watching me. Elena, darling, I've been planning Adrian's downfall for 2 years. When he threw you away, you simply became the perfect catalyst. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Everyone had been playing everyone else. But as I watched Adrian being led away in handcuffs, as I saw the justice finally being served, I found I didn't care about the manipulation. The engagement, I said quietly. Is any of it real? James turned to face me fully, his green eyes serious. The ring is real. The proposal was strategic. But Elena, he cupped my face gently. Working with you these past weeks, seeing your brilliant mind in action, watching you turn the tables on a man who underestimated you, that's as real as it gets. So, what happens now? Now? Victoria appeared beside us, having shed her wedding dress for a sharp black suit. Now, we clean house. Blackwood Industries becomes a Wellington Holdings. Ashford keeps its independence, as Dr. Kim's technology gets returned to her estate, with royalties going to her daughter. And Adrian, 20 to life, if the federal prosecutors do their job. Victoria's smile was satisfied. His father's going down too. Turns out Daddy knew about everything. As we walked out of the church together, I felt something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not just revenge, but actual justice. Adrian hadn't just lost his company or his freedom. He'd lost everything because he'd chosen to be a predator instead of a partner. One more surprise, James said as we reached the street. A car pulled up and a woman stepped out. Mid-40s, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a simple black dress. Elena Romano, she asked, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Sarah Kim's daughter, Lisa. I wanted to thank you personally for helping get justice for my mother. I shook her hand, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry I was part of what hurt her, even unknowingly. You were just as much a victim as she was, Lisa said gently, but you chose to fight back. That takes courage. As we drove away from the wreckage of Adrian's wedding day, I thought about the last 3 weeks. The long nights planning our strategy, the careful evidence gathering, the moment-by-moment choreography of Adrian's downfall. Do you think he saw it coming? I asked James. Adrian? No. He was too arrogant to imagine that 3 women could outmaneuver him. James smiled. That was his fatal flaw. He never learned to respect his opponents. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll destroy you all. A. I showed the message to James and Victoria, who both started laughing. He's texting from federal prison, Victoria said. What's he going to do? File a complaint with the warden? I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Adrian Blackwood no longer deserved space in my head. 6 months later, I stood in the executive boardroom of Wellington Global, now Wellington Romano Industries, watching our stock price hit record highs. James had made good on every promise. We were true partners in every sense. Victoria ran Ashford Holdings with the efficiency of a Swiss watch, having channeled her gift for manipulation into legitimate business strategy. And somewhere in Portland, Lisa Kim was using her mother's royalties to fund a scholarship program for women in tech. Adrian had wanted to send me away to clear the path for his perfect life. Instead, he'd created the architect of his own destruction. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Sometimes, justice wears a wedding dress and carries a recording device. And sometimes, the woman they throw away comes back to burn their world down, not with tears, but with a smile.